Hello, everybody. My name's Tyler Parisien, and today I'm going to present to you guys my dissertation research that was finished and published last year. I received support from American Indian College Fund to finish this dissertation, and without that support, I don't know if I would have finished. It was pretty difficult. So that's why I decided to present this research today. So the title is Perceptions of an Indigenous STEM Nonprofit Contributions to Self-Efficacy and Educational Experience. So we're going to kind of just go through the basics of my dissertation. We're going to brief introduction, statement of the problem, purpose of the study, discuss the research question, conceptual framework. I actually took out the assumptions slides. We're not going to cover that today. Research design, population and sampling method, instrumentation, data collection, data analysis, findings of the study, recommendations for future research, and then my conclusion. So whenever I was deciding what to research or what to pretty much view when I was starting my dissertation, one of my mentors told me to research or focus on something that I'm passionate about. And something that I was really passionate about at the time, and I'm still passionate about it, is ASIS, the American Indian Science and Engineering Society. I've been a member of ASIS since I was 12 years old. So for over half of my life, I've been a member of this organization. And one of the things that I realized when I was a student member on the board was that we don't have a lot of data or information to share with our funders or prospective funders on the impact that this organization has had in supporting its own mission. So I thought that that was a great place to focus my research. So this study is a qualitative case study and investigated how a STEM nonprofit contributes to self-efficacy and educational experiences as perceived by Indigenous STEM graduates. And this study is focusing on ASIS. There are other Indigenous STEM nonprofits, but again, I focused on ASIS because that's where my passion kind of laid. And then one of the challenges I find when I'm presenting this research is some people are not aware of what self-efficacy means. So for the purpose of this study, self-efficacy is basically a person's own belief that they could accomplish a specific task. So the way we were discussing it in this research was pursuing a college degree or pursuing a STEM-based degree. So statement of the problem, Native Americans and Indigenous people are underrepresented in the STEM disciplines. Factors prompting those low numbers include or could be including lack of exposure to STEM, lack of interest in STEM, lack of confidence, lack of a sense of belonging, and lack of goal congruency. So it is not known how a STEM nonprofit contributes to self-efficacy and educational experiences as perceived by the STEM graduates. And basically the whole statement of this, the statement of the problem kind of follows the mission of ASIS, which was to increase the representation of Indigenous people in the STEM disciplines. And that's kind of where my statement of the problem came from, is because Indigenous people are underrepresented in the STEM disciplines. So the purpose of this study was to explore how a STEM nonprofit contributes to self-efficacy and educational experiences. That's kind of repetitive. Researchers have taken various approaches to uncovering why Indigenous people are so underrepresented in the STEM fields, mostly what strategies colleges and universities are taking to support these students in these programs. And that is one thing that I noticed through pretty much every article that I found researching um, persistence through STEM degrees for Indigenous people, was that all of the studies were focusing around what the colleges and universities do themselves, how they support students, what kind of programming they offer, what kind of courses they may offer. But there was hardly any, if not none, no research on how nonprofits like ASIS and SACNIS and even the College Fund are supporting Indigenous people when pursuing STEM degrees. So I felt that pretty much or kind of proved the gap and the need for this study. So the strategies that nonprofit organizations are taking to be an asset to Indigenous people are unknown in comparison to the strategies that educational institutions employ. So that led me to my research question. And when I was developing this question, it was probably rewritten about 17 times in the matter of 3 years. And we finally were sold with how does a STEM nonprofit contribute to self-efficacy and educational experiences as perceived by Indigenous STEM graduates. And the reason that this research question was kind of hard to solidify is because I wasn't sure if I wanted to take a phenomenological approach or if I wanted to try to do maybe some Indigenous methodology or case study. And so every time we kind of changed the way that we were going to, or I was going to pursue this study, the research question kind of changed along with that. And I'm sure everybody can relate to that a little bit. So the conceptual framework is focused around social cognitive career theory and bicultural identity formation model. Social cognitive career theory is used in understanding interrelationships among individual and environmental and behavioral variables that are assumed to influence a person's academic and career choices. And social cognitive career theory is derived from Bandura's social cognitive theory, which predicts that self-efficacy promotes favorable outcome expectations. And this study is kind of looking at how ACEs kind of influence self-efficacy. So that's why social cognitive career theory is part of my conceptual framework. And then with bicultural identity formation, it's used in understanding how Indigenous students draw upon their innermost values as needed for their psychological and personal support as they progress in higher education. So bicultural identity formation follows 4 basic constructs, and it's organized that organize the model. That includes alienation, self-discovery, realignment, and participation. So according to Bickle and Jensen, indigenous people, when pursuing higher education degrees, feel alienated at first, and then as they progress, they undergo self-discovery, kind of learn who they are, get more solidified in being an indigenous person outside of our comfort zone. We realign our goals, and then we start participating more in higher education, which eventually leads to our successful pursuit of a degree. And so the research design for this study was a qualitative approach using the case study design. Yin explained that the purpose of a qualitative case study is to investigate a phenomenon in its real life context. The case study design was most appropriate for this research because the researcher is studying a specific phenomena within the Indigenous STEM population. And data was collected through a questionnaire, semi-structured interviews, and a focus group. So again, when I was developing my research design, I wanted to pursue kind of an Indigenous way of approaching my dissertation where gathering data was more kind of just visiting or story sharing. And unfortunately, my college didn't support that. And so I had to take the case study design and kind of mold it into my own design. When I was going through the semi-structured interviews and focus groups, when I was with my participants, it did feel more story sharing and more conversational rather than, I'm conducting interviews for a study. And I think the fact that I was a Native American researcher, researching Native American students, that they were able to share more information with me. And I also feel that my participants were more comfortable with me because I may have met them in ACES, or we were both members of ACES. And, I my advisors were worried that that would hurt my data, but I felt that it helped my data. So population and sampling method. So the participants in this case study were taken from general members of ACES. ACES defines members as American Indians, which means person who is a member of the indigenous peoples of North America, which includes American Indians, Alaska Natives, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, and First Nations. The targeted sample for the study was self-identifying Indigenous people who have completed a STEM degree since 2015 and who are also members of ACES. And I put in there self-identifying Indigenous people because sometimes people get too wrapped up in being a member of a tribe or a member of a federally recognized tribe. And I felt that as long as somebody was self-identifying as an Indigenous person, that was able to be included in the study. And then I chose people who have completed a STEM-based degree since 2015 because I wanted more relevant or more recent experiences with ACES, because ACES has been around since 1970s, I believe 77 or somewhere around there, just as long as our tribal college has been around. And so, I could have opened up my study to include all of those people, but I felt that a more recent experience, uh, more recent graduates would tell the story of ACES in its current status and its current um, function. Um, as far as identifying potential members, the ACES membership director, who's a friend of mine, identified members that have graduated with a STEM-based degree since 2015, and she actually actively contacted them with my recruitment email and flyer. And then from there, I used propulsive sampling in this study. So basically, anybody who responded to the email from the ACES membership director in the order they responded to me is how they were included in the study. Because of ACES membership information is confidential, it was not provided to me. So that kind of actually helped me with propulsive sampling because I wasn't able to see who can potentially be participating and contacting them individually. I had to wait until they contacted me. And then no specific gender or age was specified for the study. And I had 17 participants volunteering for interviews or focus groups. And those 17 people identified with these tribes that you see in the corner here. We've got Nez Perce, Navajo, LCO, Laguna Pueblo, Dene, Crow Creek Sioux Tribe, Crow tribal member, White Earth, Ojibwe, 3 affiliated tribes. And one thing I was actually surprised about is that I didn't get any members from my own tribe that were willing to participate, but that's fine. I think it kind of helped me again with my study. So instrumentation, I developed an interview protocol and a focus group protocol was used for instrumentation for questioning. The interview instrument was utilized to uncover the opinions, observations, and experience of our participants during their time as ACES members pursuing a STEM degree. And the questionnaire was created in Qualtrics and used to interview and focus group participants via link in the email. The questionnaire focused primarily on demographic information, but also helped me determine their participation in ACES and their community beyond degree completion. As far as my interview protocol and focus group protocol, that was where I really got a lot of help from the American Indian College Fund. People that they brought in last year, Craig Mariquin, I worked with him really closely and solidified my interview protocol. And matter of fact, I think it was less than a month after meeting with Craig, I was starting to conduct my interviews. So data collection, questionnaire, interview, the average interview lasted 37 minutes. I had 10 participants that participated in the interview portion. There was no time limit set for answering. And then I had a focus group with 7 participants. And again, there was no time limit set for answering, but I ended up having perfectly under 2 hours with an hour and 52 minutes. I recorded both the interviews and the focus group with Skype and audio recording with the Rev voice recorder on my iPhone. And the data collection process took me a period of about 1 month, which was really fast and surprising. But after I got the 17 participants, I felt that that was, well, we shot for 10 originally, so having 17 was amazing. It was great. We were happy to have that. And once I was, um, this is kind of gets distracting. Um, Once interviews were completed, I started with data analysis. So the Rev voice recording app actually um, transcribes the data for me. So they were Rev transcribed for me, and I printed those transcriptions on Word documents. So I started coding the data following Saldana's methodology for data analysis. I did a first cycle coding and then a second cycle coding. Both of the first and second cycle coding were actually completed by hand. So I went through each of the transcripts and started highlighting the text based on the words that they used, definitions of words, and main topics of the paragraphs and discussions. From there, I went through again and started pulling that data into categories and grouping them together based on their meaning. So examples would be community or opportunities. Once that was done and completed, I condensed them further into major themes and codes relating to the research questions. So that was the conclusion of the first cycle of data coding. So once I uncovered that I had 5 primary themes, I then went into the pattern matching of coding, and I did that with deduce. So I had parent codes and child codes, and I manually coded again and started grouping quotes and meanings together as they kind of fit into a pattern. The 5 primary themes that emerged from my data were community, culture, support, opportunities, and representation. And this is my favorite part of the whole process, was actually getting to see the data as it was coming together. So the 5 primary themes were community, and that kind of had the daughter code of mentor and mentorship. Culture, which had the daughter codes of culture specific groups, identity, Indigenous knowledge, values, and goals. And then with support, it was the daughter codes were Indigenous society and membership. Opportunities was probably my biggest theme. And a lot of the codes that fit under there were opportunities that were specific to ACES. So it's no surprise to me that ACES came up as the daughter code. Funding, internships, leadership opportunities, lighting the pathway, networking, and research. And then finally, the last code was representation, and those had the daughter codes of confidence and empowerment. And again, this is a qualitative research study. So as a in, participants were interviewed, they were asked semi-structured questions, they were open-ended, not leading in any way, and we took those codes and again just kind of looked for patterns and main points of their responses. And you could see here again in this visual representation that opportunities was the most mentioned or most uncovered theme in the analysis of the study. And my favorite part of presenting my dissertation is summarizing the words of the people that I interviewed. That these are their own words that were taken out of the interviews and the transcribing. So this is continuation of the summary of the findings. And one of the participants, participant 15, stated, "I got started in research because of a mentor at ACES." Participant 4 stated, "I think community is a big part of these groups. Native people have a talent of wherever they go, finding out community." Participant 14 stated, "It taught me to be resilient and persevere, even when there was unknowns, and because I wanted to be the first woman in my family to finish a degree or the first person in my family to finish a degree." Participant 2 stated, "ACES just really helped me find my identity in a way where I could be like this female native scientist." And I included this quote right here because, again, there are other Indigenous STEM nonprofits out there like SACNIS, and I wanted to show that I wasn't personally trying to exclude SACNIS, but this quote right here, I did a little bit in SACNIS, but ACES is where I felt like I belong more, so I mostly just worked with ACES. So I wasn't, actively trying to state that or be against SACNIS in any way. I just wanted to focus primarily on ACES, and this comment right here kind of helped me show that my participants their own opinions on the other organizations. Continuation of the summary of findings. Participant 2 stated, "This is where I first saw a Native woman who also had a doctorate degree, so that was really inspiring for me." Participant 8 stated, "ACES has formed me into a much more self-confident scientist and empowered me to realize I'm not an imposter." Participant 5, "And when I went to ACES conferences, it was the first time I ever saw an Indigenous kind of thinking in a scientific space. So I think in that regard, it increased my interest to be able to merge my two worlds together." Participant 1 stated, "I don't think I would be doing my PhD without the mentors who I met through ACES, pushing me and challenging me and saying we needed more natives in academia and you can do this." Participant 4 stated, "It's really hard. It really helped me want to achieve my goals and knowing I have a support system and knowing that I'm not alone on campus and that I have friends." And one of the things that really made me proud of this research is that I can identify myself or relate to almost every single one of these statements that were made by my participants. So it was at that moment that I kind of knew that this was the right project for me and that I was really doing something that was worthwhile. So a summary of my findings continued from the coding and from the participants' own statements. We agreed, we found, I uncovered that participants agreed that ACES was a contributing factor to their success. Participants found opportunities to support cultural ties, community, and representation through their membership within ACES. Participants referenced representation opportunities as the way ACES contributed to their self-efficacy, often referencing seeing other Indigenous people successful in STEM fields through ACES membership. Indigenous students that feel a sense of belonging in college have a greater self-efficacy in academic persistence. And the results of the study indicate that Indigenous students do undergo some transculturation through their educational journey. However, the data suggests a greater sense of self-actualization and strengthening of identity over transculturation. And that takes me back to the bicultural identity formation model. They insinuate that Indigenous people kind of have to undergo a transculturation where they have to change themselves or adjust their culture to fit in. But rather, this study suggests that there's a greater sense of self-actualization and strengthening of identity versus transculturation. And then ACES creates a professional learning community network for Indigenous students, which reduces the feeling of isolation while also creating a space for Indigenous people in STEM to collaborate and support each other. And then data collected in the study highlight the contributions of a STEM nonprofit to self-efficacy and educational experience. So participants were asked at the end of the interview or the focus group if they perceive ACES impacted their success and educational experience. And every single participant, except for one, stated yes. And then explaining how ACES impacted their success. They were also asked how it contributed to their self-efficacy, and participants referenced every theme uncovered in the study in relation to self-efficacy and ACEs. And then identity, as you all know, identity is an important part of who we are and how we carry ourselves and how we progress. And participants were asked about their identity, and their identity primarily focused around their culture, their values and goals, and Indigenous knowledge. So that led to self-actualization and explaining some of their identity issues through their educational experience. Identity is also directly tied to culture, land, tribe, and community. And social cognitive career theory states that, you know, goals have to align for success. And I do believe that through this study, we prove that also, that as long ACEs help them tie their goals to their community and to their um, culture, and that's what kind of led to their self-efficacy being supported. Recommendations for further research. Further research on this topic to include all ACES members may validate the data by providing more accurate estimations about the population. Future researchers could expand the population to include members of other STEM nonprofits, such as SACNIS. And the researcher recommends further research, including organizational leadership and staff as participants. So I felt that including ACESs or organizational leadership and their staff as part of the interview process to kind of see how the people who are running this organization perceive that they are making an impact would also be a good way to further the research. And then my conclusions, I don't know where I'm at on time because I can't see images here, but
we wrapping up is good at this point. We want to have a few minutes for questions.
okay, so the conclusion. The purpose of this case study was to explore how a STEM nonprofit contributes to self-efficacy and educational experience. Native American involvement in STEM education and STEM professions is needed, not only for the United States, but for the 573 recognized tribes and 326 Native American reservations. ACES has made major contributions to self-efficacy and educational experiences, as highlighted by this study. And the results of the study supported that Indigenous STEM graduates did undergo self-discovery and self-actualization through their process in higher education, and membership of ACES they directly contributed to strengthening their identity. And then finally, the study did not directly illuminate the stages of alienation and realignment in the bicultural identity formation model.